The previous Rebbe was once on a car of a train traveling somewhere, and he heard a group of very wealthy and influential Jews having a conversation. And the conversation was about which method of government is most appropriate according to the Torah. And these were learned people. And they knew quite a bit about Jewish history, and they knew quite a bit about Torah scholarship. And one said that the monarchy was very much in the image of the Torah's form and system of government, and he brought a number of textual proofs from the scripture itself, as well as from things that the Talmud says, and even things which Maimonides quotes in his codes in halachic terminology. And the next argued that the Torah was very much in favor of communism and of sharing, and he brought proofs from the Jubilee year where all fields revert back to the original owner. He brought proof from the sabbatical year where the field would lie fallow and everybody would be able to participate, and for many other of the Torah's obligations of taking care of those who were downtrodden. And yet, a third brought a number of proofs from the Torah that a social democracy would be the ideal form of governance. And the previous Rebbe was a very young man at the time, and he mixed in, and he said, "Can I offer some commentary?" And not knowing who he was, but he looked like he knew what he was talking about. So they said, "Sure, go ahead, young man." And he said to them, "You're all right and you're all wrong." He said, "The Torah is the ultimate embodiment of truth. It's a divine truth. It's God's truth, and therefore anything in the world that'll be true will have to be found in the Torah. However, everything in the world is ultimately mixed with toxins, and it has lots of chaff, which is kind of mixed in as well. So what you're going to have in every form of man-made or human-created system of governance, you're going to have occupational hazards, you're going to have various things that don't work well and are not effective. And at the same time, you'll have details which do work well and which are effective. That which is effective and works well and is true will be found in the Torah. And that which isn't, well, you won't find it in the Torah. In other words, the Torah is the embodiment of the ultimate truth. So anything in the world that has a little bit of truth to it, and most things do have some truth to them, you will find a corollary somewhere in the Torah. But that doesn't mean the Torah endorses various kinds of things that are created, whether they're isms or ideas or mechanisms that are created by people. I'm not sure if that helps, but you were saying about...
Actually, I find that that's a fascinating story. And, it reminds me of a rabbi here in Toronto who I knew very well, unfortunately passed away, an Orthodox rabbi. And he always maintained that the Liberals, the Liberal Party of Canada and the Democrat Party in the United States are actually closer to Torah values in terms of how they want to help society, whatever, social.
There are elements within the Liberal Party's platform that may be in keeping with the Torah. There are elements within the conservative platform or Republican platform that may be in keeping with the Torah. Neither of those systems is in keeping with the Torah. Neither of those systems is perfect. I would say, since you're bringing politics into the mix, and Torah has an opinion about everything, that when we vote, and I believe that we should vote, I believe that every single citizen should participate in the democratic process, and we as Canadian citizens have an obligation, not just a right, but I feel an obligation to involve ourselves in the political process. And I think that we as Jewish people, regardless of where we live, always have to be very mindful of our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land of Israel, and we need to support Israel. That's a very, very important part of who we are. It's part of who we are as human beings, in fact, and certainly who we are as Jews. And I would say that when I look at the two political party platforms, one of them is clearly far more supportive of Israel. And I want to tell you something, Martin. Supporting Israel is not only something that's meaningful or important for Jews. As our former Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, very eloquently said, why wouldn't I support Israel? He said, Israel, the modern state of Israel, believes in and aligns with all of the ideas and ideals of the country called Canada. Why wouldn't a Canadian support Israel? Why would a Canadian support a society that is profoundly at odds with things like human rights and people's ability to live and pursue the freedoms and experience the kind of life that is punctuated with a sense of profound respect and appreciation for all human beings, also known as a society that is open and tolerant. So for the life of me, I can't understand why a Canadian wouldn't support the only democracy in the Middle East. I can't understand why a normal thinking Canadian wouldn't want to see Israel prosper.
Well, unfortunately, there's a lot of cases like that. We just saw that CUPE, the national, asked Fred Hahn to resign because of his anti-Israel, which was basically anti-Semitic, really.
Well, that's exactly my point, Martin. Because the modern state of Israel is so close to the country which we call Canada, the place we call home, the fact that somebody would actively support a group that believes in murder and mayhem, that throws gay people off the roof if it doesn't behead them, the fact that a Canadian would support that can mean only one thing. It means that they have a profound bias against Israel. That's called anti-Semitism in the vernacular, or maybe we should be more blunt about it and call it Jew hatred. So if you are a person who is filled with hatred for a visible minority like Jews, well, then you aren't acting in a very Canadian fashion, and I don't think you should be the head of a union, and I don't think that people like that should be given a platform. We don't believe in hate speech in Canada.
I agree. But unfortunately, it seems to be very prominent among the unions. We saw with before with Sid Ryan, who also came out quite clearly anti-Israel and the statement. It's unfortunate, but it is a fact. And I just remind everybody before we go on that if you have anything you'd like to say, any comments about what we're talking about, any questions for Rabbi Kaplan, please give us a call. The line is open. Just give us a call at 416-870-1007.
You know, Martin, I'd like to believe that the unions are not bad people and that there are a couple of bad apples in union leadership. And I hope that the bad apples are removed, because when you leave bad apples in the bushel, invariably other apples start to go bad too. And there should be no tolerance whatsoever for Jew hatred and anti-Semitism in our country. And I have to tell you that when I look at two political parties, I see one political party that panders to anti-Semites, that panders to people who hate the Jewish people and the state of Israel, and I see another party that is extremely friendly and favorably disposed and kind of embraces the ideas and ideals that Israel represents. So whilst one party may have certain elements of Torah values within them, I don't think that's where Jews should necessarily be voting. In fact, I believe they necessarily shouldn't. And I'm pointedly and purposely not mentioning any particular party. Do your own research. I'm a rabbi. My job is not politics. But I think that when you do your research, you should do it with an open mind, and you should, as the putative the Democratic candidate, I think she's actually been acclaimed now, Kamala Harris, likes to say, what can be if we are unburdened from the past. I think I talked to you about that. It happens to be a Marxist phrase, and it blows my mind that she uses it that often. I don't know why she uses it that often. We should not, generally speaking, be unburdened from our past. We must remember everything that has happened to our people. We as a Jewish people cannot successfully chart our future if we forget things like the Holocaust, or if we forget the suffering that has been inflicted upon our people, and certainly without a memory, a very clear living memory of the more than 1,200 years in which the Jewish people had independent governance in the land of Israel. That was continuous, just virtually continuous. And I'm talking about the Torah we studied and the experiences we had. We should never be, quote, end quote, unburdened from those things. Those are privileges, not burdens. You know, the story.
And I just want to make a
But I just want to I do want to say that if we could be unburdened by previous political biases or people, who tend to vote in a particular way because that's how the grandparents voted, that actually is a good thing. And this proves my point that even a statement like that, a statement that I don't like what we could have in the future if we are unburdened by the past, has truth to it. There are some times when we have to unburden ourselves from the past. There are certain things in our past which are not good, and we are best served unburdening ourselves. So, there's truth everywhere. And I think that we have to be involved in the political process because we have to do our part living in a liberal democracy to ensure that the things we care about are looked after and taken care of.
Well, I agree with you there. For sure, we have to participate in everything, and that's part of the obligations of being a citizen of a country is to vote. But I just want to make something clear here to listeners that I'm not anti-union. I believe the union has a purpose. Just some of the leaders here I have a problem with. And if you look at Israel, the Histadrut, which is a very large union, it's basically almost a second government there, and seems to work out very well.
I think certainly the unions in Israel were one of the most powerful political forces that dominated Israeli politics, and I made it very clear that I have nothing bad to say about unions per se. We talked about a couple of bad apples, and it should be very, very clear to us and to all of our listeners that we are not speaking in broad terms. We are not using any kind of wide brushes to paint any ism or any movement or any organization. We're talking about people, and bad people should be called out for their bad behavior. And if you are a biased, hate-filled individual who is unable to think clearly and has to make decisions based on knee-jerk, hateful biases, you don't belong in a position of leadership anywhere in Canada. And frankly, you shouldn't be given a platform to spew your hatred and your bias.
Absolutely. Yes, it should not be given a platform. And I agree with you 100% on that. And when it comes to voting, I agree. Everybody should vote. Now, personally, on my own, this is just time for myself here. If I had felt roughly the same about two parties or two candidates, and one was perceived as being a stronger support of Israel than the other, that would probably tip the balance in their favor. However, that was the only thing that I liked about them, and I didn't like any of their other policies, any of the domestic policies or anything like that. I don't think I could bring myself to vote for them.
Again, when we talk about politics, we're talking about something which is not inherently holy or sacred. There's a reason that we separate a religion from politics. There's a very pragmatic element to politics. One of the problems, I think, with many people in today's day and age is that they're living lives that are so empty of spirituality and godliness, living such godless lives, and they are so far from Torah and Torah study that instead they have chosen to make politics their religion. And they have chosen to make political ideas and philosophies their Torah. That's problematic. I would say that politics is like dealing with sewage. And when I need to deal with sewage, I call a good plumber. So...
Well, I agree. They both have a bad smell at times. Anyhow, Rabbi Kaplan, we have a caller who has a question for you. Steve from Toronto here wants to know. Now, I know it's kind of a loaded question. I know you've addressed this with Zelda in the past, and it's something I'm not very comfortable with, but I feel obligated to forward it to you since he called. And that's how would God have permitted the Holocaust to occur?
Well, here's the thing. Steve, are you there?
No, Rabbi Kaplan, we can't put him on the air.
Oh, I see. Okay. So here's the thing, Martin. God has made a bond with us, and his bond with us is that he is going to give us the freedom to choose between good and to choose between evil. God never said that if you get too evil, well, then I'm just going to have to mix in and stop everything. God doesn't stop us from sinning. He doesn't stop us from being mean or capricious or selfish. He doesn't stop us from being violent. He doesn't stop us from doing things that harm ourselves. He doesn't stop people when they take their own lives, and he doesn't stop people when they, God forbid, choose to inflict pain and horrors upon others. If God would intervene every time people did something inappropriate, there would be no freedom of choice. And we would not be the ones to build that perfected world which we call the age of Mashiach. It can only happen by virtue of the fact that we have the freedom to choose. So what does it mean when people say, where was God? I have a different question. Where was humanity? Where was the Canadian government that refused to allow a single Jew into Canada? Where was the United States that was asked multiple times to bomb the tracks to Auschwitz, but elected not to? They could have saved easily over 10,000 lives in the waning days of the Holocaust as Hungarian Jews were being sent at lightning speed to their death. Of one sortie, over 200 sorties a day were being flown. One sortie diverted to the tracks leading to Auschwitz could have stopped the death and the killing. Why does nobody ask that question? Why is it that Mackenzie King is a hero, a Canadian hero, who has hospitals and streets and provinces named after him, when in fact, when he was asked a question about the imperiled lives of millions of Jews, he said one is too many, or none is too many? That's the question I'm more interested in asking. And I'm interested in asking those questions not because I want to dig up old corpses or bring up old ghosts. Because if we can't deal with the mistakes of yesterday, then how will we do the right thing today? So asking questions like, where was God, absolves us of any responsibility. We don't have an obligation to do anything. God will intervene. But in fact, God says he doesn't. That was his bond with us. And the next time God intervenes in an overt and open way is when you're going to see Mashiach coming. And I hope that's very speedily and in our days. But I also want to mention that if you live with your eyes open and if you listen carefully to the news and what's going on, you will see miraculous things happening. Only a few days ago, there was a monster who was loaded with bombs, an enormous amount of bombs, and he was heading to a synagogue to detonate himself and kill as many Jews as possible. And miraculously, he stopped and he ended up detonating himself and only lightly injuring one person. And the amazing thing was that a day before, there was a Sephardic rabbi who came to the synagogue and he made a little speech. And in his speech he said that the people that are coming here to study Torah are now in what we call Bein Hazmanim. The schools have closed, the yeshivot are breaking for a couple of weeks, and he said, you are choosing to come on your own free time, of your own free volition to study Torah. Surely this will bring about Hashem's protection. Surely this will bring good things for us and for all of Am Yisrael. And the next day, this is what happened. So we do see amazing things that happen. And it's not to in any way gloss over the horrible things that are happening. You know, the body of 6 bodies were recovered. Immediately our enemies put things onto social media like they were killed by Israeli bombs. That was the first thing that it began to spread out into the blog sphere. And guess what? Unfortunately, they found bullets inside the bodies of each of these people, which means this is a war crime. These were innocent human beings who were taken by monsters and shot to death. And then weren't even given the dignity of burial, and it was through the bravery of Chayalei Tzahal that their bodies were recovered. So these are the kinds of things that I think should bother us. These are the kind of questions we should be asking ourselves. And we should ask ourselves questions like, why is it that people are allowed to demonstrate openly on the streets of Toronto, calling for the mayhem and murder of Jews in Israel and beyond? And why is our government not saying anything?
Rabbi Kaplan, I'm afraid we're out of time right now. I want to thank you, and I hope to see you're satisfied with the answer that Rabbi Kaplan provided. And we will talk to you again tomorrow morning, Rabbi Kaplan.
Thank you. Martin, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share words of Torah and I hope inspiration online. And I just want to end with the hope and prayer that very, very speedily and in our days we won't have to ask any questions because Mashiach will be here to answer them all. May that be b'mheira u'biyameinu, speedily and in our days. Amen. Have a wonderful day.
Amen.
Thanks for joining. Take care, everybody on Facebook.